joining this. I don't know what to call it, but it's nice to see the gays all together in one space.
It's a briefing meeting. You'll know what to call it later on in life.
Yeah, when I edit and finish. But I wanted to talk about the other day. I was actually, Motlatsi, I must tell you, Nikki, this is Jay. I went to visit Jay, and it dawned on me. Oh my God, we're going to be those older gay guys that we didn't have to look up to, that kind of thing, and that made me very happy. And well, maybe some people can say, well, they've always had role models, but I remember being.
It made you happy.
Well, it did. Well, I don't mind. Now I'm enjoying aging and getting older and wiser. I'm kind of enjoying it because maybe it's because there's nothing I haven't done for Motlatsi. I don't have any regrets. So I'm looking forward to this new space. So
all right.
That's why it made me happy, because I always found myself in spaces that I knew were too dangerous for me, but I was there because the gays were there. But I always end up with the wrong gays until I found what was on with Jay and so forth. I don't know what you expect.
No, I get that. I mean, I remember I actually wrote something about that for Mamba Online a while back. An article about how we need to see, and I wasn't talking about people my age, but I was talking about seeing gay black men who are in their 40s and their 50s. So, as a reference point, so as to say, you definitely can be gay and 40 and living and 50 and living and 60 and living, because it's not something that we grew up seeing. And of course, I mean, historically, you can find that there's evidence. And funnily enough, one of my Facebook friends who's based in the US wrote almost like a response to that article based on the American experience. And they also have a similar thing. But obviously, because queer history in America is a bit more well documented than ours, there were reasons. So he spoke to a couple of older gay men who would say the reason you don't find a lot of 40 or 50 or 60-year-old or gay men in their 60s because, one, most of them died of AIDS, in the early 90s to mid 90s. And then the ones that remained kind of like got ostracized because of the whole idea around what is expected or what is seen as ideal around being gay. So you must look a certain way, you must have like a certain, class aspirations or whatever the case is. So even if they do exist, which they do, they don't necessarily get profiled, they don't go out, they don't, they buy their houses, live at home. If they have kids, they raise their kids and life goes on. And that's why they're not seen there. But I found myself asking, could that be the same situation here? And obviously I don't have answers to that because I don't know any 60-year-old
Maybe
gay
Jay
man.
does. Jay has been gay longer than all of us. Not even in terms of age, but Jay has just been gay longer than all of us.
For the longest.
But the thing about it is, like, I think I share the same sentiments. Where when I got into the space, I remember feeling like a hunger to see older, even like maybe 2 ages higher than me, two age gaps higher than me. You just have something to aspire to. And I remember one day there was this I love shebeens, so I went to the shebeen. We call it Sam, ne? This years ago, about 10 years ago. Eh?
You've taken me there, and what happened there?
Exactly. So I remember I was there, and while we were there was this older man, and he was, he was sitting there with his friends. We didn't make anything out of it. But as the night progresses, him and this other older man, they looked like they were in their 60s or so. They started to be quite intimate, not sexually per se, but like holding hands and things like that. And they gravitated towards us. And I remember asking one of them their names, and I got to learn that story where they actually met in prison. And while they were in prison, they both had wives outside. But then after they served their term, the other one, of course, got out first. The other one also later followed. They're from the same hood, and they rekindled their relationship. And they've been in a relationship for like about 20 years. And this was 10 years ago when they told me this.
Oh, wow.
And they were married still.
Sorry?
Were they married still to their wives?
No, that part I don't know, but like I think they just like they were together though,
Yeah,
and this was like in 20.
it sounds like they never went back to their previous lives before prison, and they carried on together.
You know, and you know what? Until this day, I still rack my brain hoping that I'll run into them again. But I just met them once, and I was remember 2010 because of the World Cup season thing. And we were at some time, and I met this couple, and they said they met in jail. They've been together for 20 years, and it blew my mind. They were like quite in their 60s, almost like late 60s. So I think that was the only thing, especially in my own book, that I came across a gay relationship on. And ever since then, I mean, like I think the older gay people are part of they're there, but I think they're so invisibilized, you know, because I suppose that like you mentioned, I mean, the AIDS wave didn't only happen also in America, but it also happened here. And those who survived it, they suffered the hangover of it because for a long time, especially in Africa, gay men also got to be seen as the carriers and whatever, all those kinds of things that even further put them in the closet. But it would be interesting to know, like in white culture, the white gay spaces, do they have maybe they're perhaps more visible because of certain levels of privileges? I suppose I don't know.
You know, because I wanted to ask so many questions based on the story you just told, Jay, but right now I deliberately asked Black gay men only to this conversation, and it's, you know, in South Africa, we always have to be so politically correct, and for good reasons, I think, because we have to be inclusive, so we understand each other, and then, you know. But today, this was deliberate in case people will be watching and asking themselves, why is this just only men? But I think I framed it in a way of Black gay men having a conversation, because we have so much to talk about also without having other for now. And when you talked about the AIDS and being gay thing, Jay, you know, I found myself, even when I had started working, that we were going to funerals of Black gay men who died of AIDS. And I don't know what was the delay. Maybe because when you both actually work in a space where you interact with so many people, especially LGBTQ people. What delayed us in not dying of AIDS in post-millennial South Africa? You know, it boggles the mind.
That's a good question.
I don't think there was an actual delay. I think there's a benefit coming from the activism of the 90s around what HIV was and had to be dealt with. And in as much as, yes, there could have been a high number of gay people, gay men specifically, who were HIV positive and might have, gotten to AIDS level. But by and large, the burden, the AIDS burden, was a heterosexual burden in this country. It continues to be even. So I think it's almost like the side benefit is that because the majority is struggling with this, you get the remnant benefit of whatever it is that's good that's going to come out of it. So if straight people are getting money and you happen to be, or no, that's actually a bad example. So if straight people are getting benefits out of BEE, let's put it that way. So if Black straight men are getting benefits out of BEE, and you also happen to be a Black man who just so happens to not be straight, it's very easy for you to still fall into the pool of people who get the benefit out of, the BEE benefits. So similarly, as the country moved to a stage where ARVs were being made available for everyone, and ARVs for pregnant women who might have been HIV positive at the time were being made available, then everyone who could have access to that got access to it. But I think also what then made it somewhat good and bad is the stigma around being gay in this country, which continues to exist, enables one to, you remain in the closet for being gay, but then part of that is that you can still walk into a clinic as just a man who needs services and not necessarily have to suffer the double stigma of being a gay man who also has HIV. And I think that is something that a lot of that doesn't necessarily get spoken about. But I think there wasn't necessarily a particular delay that stopped anyone who was, existing in post 2K South Africa from being HIV positive. I also think there continues to be a certain level of fear that informs the communication around HIV, even to this day. I mean, in as much as we have all that we have, you can get on PrEP, you can get PEP, you can get ARVs almost immediately after getting your positive results, and you could be undetectable within a few months, even depending on the extent and how committed you are to the treatment. But despite all of that and knowing all of that, there's still the communication that says be fearful of this illness. So I think that's also part of it.
Motlatsi, maybe I'm inclined to agree with you that there wasn't a delay, and I take your explanation because it makes logical sense. But Jay, maybe I can ask you, maybe it's got a lot to do with activism not reaching enough people at the time because of lack of support, or is it a geographical issue? It depends where you are at the time for you not to get information.
I think I mean, I'm fairly young, so I got into the bed but like I got into the bed with good activism, nah? And when I came out about my sexuality and things like that, and I joined movements like out organizations, and I started to do community work, there was already quite a high buzz around HIV and AIDS work. That was the hot cake, basically. Everybody got to be. It was such a very rampant, talked about issue. So for me, it almost felt almost immediately. I didn't have a context of it being a delay. But I remember specifically that, nationwide, that actually the movement of access to ARVs, for instance, was actually pushed by visibly quite gay men, the Zaki Ahmed, the Simon Ngoli, who started actually tech, for instance. And now it's one of the hugest programs in the country. And yet, they were almost the forefront of that movement, which benefited actually the whole masses beyond sexual orientation. So that was my context.
Actually, the TAC thing, I remember there was a time when there was so much propaganda around TAC. We actually believed that TAC was against government and it was bad for all of us. Actually, I just couldn't let that go away. Yeah, I just couldn't let that go.
Exactly. Until I had the privilege of actually coming closer to them physically and actually hearing the issues and understanding the issues. And also at the same time, there was also quite a lot of studies that were done by people from out there coming in here, and they were doing studies around what are the vulnerabilities levels for gay men experiences. I remember like Out Organization did a long time ago, did a study about levels of experiences for LGBTI people in terms of access to healthcare, and also, experiences also of homophobia in other areas. But I remember there was also a lot of investment in placing the vulnerability, especially of gay Black men in townships.
Yeah.
There was this whole romanticization, even sometimes it was actually quite yucky, but the silver lining about it was that it gave immediate agencies to a lot of gay Black men in townships. Hence, and then we got sort of like avenues of getting an out organization to have a network of systems in Mamelodi to say to everybody who's got this, here's a direct link where you can get communication, for instance. You know what I mean? And I think that, I don't want to call it even a privilege per se, but I call it like it was quite one of the amazing things that happened to a lot of gay Black men in townships. And when I was looking for Out, I had the opportunities to travel a lot of townships in the country, and basically obsessing around access up to healthcare. And sadly, the focus was strongly just on gay Black men. Yeah, which is actually quite disturbing. But anyway, but as a gay Black man, I would say, to answer your question, I did not necessarily feel like there was a delay. I actually felt there was quite progressiveness. But that's because I was in my, where I was actually, where I found myself in, you know. So everything looked like it was happening so fast. But I'm sure for like another gay black boy of my age who was living on the outskirts of Mamelodi, perhaps in you know, in a squatter camp, for instance, was quite detached from that reality. But also the opposite of that, I also would come across the highly privileged black middle class gay man living in a suburb, né? But living so capsuled that he actually does not have information around HIV. Do you get what I mean?
I hear you.
Because if you think about it, when you're in a township, messages around HIV were everywhere, at every corner. You know, they were talked about everywhere. But if you go to a suburban area, you barely even see a poster that talks about HIV. So there was also this portion of gay black men that I came across in my tertiary life and things like that. Some I recanted in high school, but they were so capsuled in such classism or whatever that, you know, the idea was like they're not vulnerable. The vulnerable ones are the Jays who are living in a township.
Yeah.
Which the irony now became those ones who were seen to be not at risk were actually even more involved in more sexual risk behaviors. You know, there's many things I learned in those circles that I'm like, what the, you know, that they were doing there. And most of them was because there was this false sense of security, you know?
Yeah.
So on one day there was a delay, on another day there was no delay. So I suppose it developed on the context, perhaps maybe economic context.
Yeah.
You know?
And
yeah.
Now we've been reflecting on things that happened 10 years ago. It's 10 years later now, Jay, and I'm graying.
Yeah, we come from.
But now, my personal issue is, I'm sure I have both of you on Facebook, and I can't stand straight men and their behavior. And I just get so annoyed because there's something, they've got so much entitlement around everything, even, you know, and this is my experience, and I've made it my mission to become visible. And you know, and it hurts me sometimes that posting a picture of me and my boyfriend kissing is a political statement. It's not because I really want to. It's because I really want to be people who have this subtle homophobia, and sometimes it's not even classism and othering other people that they don't necessarily understand and so forth. So I'm now starting a new topic on heteronormativity and othering, as you would call it. And I want us to share our own experience, because sometimes I have fewer friends now because this kind of behavior also seeped through women heterosexual friends that I had, and there will be subtle homophobia, very subtle homophobia stuff that they would say, and it's just like being a white person that only likes Jay Matlou, but is very racist to somebody who comes to those, or you know what I mean. So I don't know what's been your experience, guys, with straight people. I mean, they give me a headache.
Oh my God. Let me start.
No, go ahead, Jay. Go ahead.
No, but the thing is, maybe I'll give you a kickstart also. The thing is, I've been to 2 job interviews late last year, and both of them I felt that we spoke about my personal life, and I shared about losing my husband, and so it was clear you are interviewing a gay man, and I had a feeling both of those interviews I didn't get the job because they just wouldn't know what to do with me. So I was imagining being a trans person. Just imagine being trans and being in an interview, and they find out you're trans. So I'm just a gay man, and some people still don't believe me. I'm not saying anything that I'm gay. So can you imagine being a trans person walking into an interview full of straight people, and as soon as you say husband as a man, and you actually but not we say little kids just to distract themselves. So I've got lots of irritations about straight people who insist on living in that soul you were talking about.
You know what you're making me think of. I just had a reflection of ever since I came out and up until now, what has been my level of annoyances. Ne? And I realized that as a Black gay man, that I my cisgenderism, ne, made me survive a lot of moments, you know, where when you said earlier on that like you are now so super, not even sensitive. Sensitive is not the right word, but you are now more super alert, you know, to anything that is remotely quite, you know, derogatory to gay men. Whereas for me, I think at the very beginning, there were moments where it would just fly over my head, and there've been moments where it's just too hard to look at, because, you know, I'm in a world feeling alone, so I need people who affirm me very quickly. So even if they 80% like me, so I would let certain things slide. But I'm at a point right now, I'm also where you are at, where I've got a very high level of intolerance to such bullshit, especially when it comes to trans issues now. Because I think trans issues, somebody put it very nicely, says like trans issues are where gay issues were 20 years ago, if you can think, you know, if you can put it that way. So, so even as Black gay men who are cisgendered, we've got those privileges that we gotta push the transgender agenda, whether we like it or not. You know, I'm not saying we're expert in it, but we have to keep the pushing the envelope to say to cisgendered straight people that we are not all like this as gay men. There's even effeminate gay men. And also on top of that, there's what we call transgender, and you gotta know about it. Don't just say I'll take this one and not the other. You either take us all or you don't. So, but this approach that I have now, I think it takes a lot of work and experience for one to be here. So I don't hold it against a lot of gay men who sort of like shy away from it or shield away from it, especially those who do not work in active spaces. You know, let's say a typical gay man who went to school, who was bullied in high school and said, "I'm gonna show them," and then goes to varsity and works hard and becomes an expert and becomes whatever and becomes highly privileged and now is living in a mansion, big house. When he goes to club, he goes to farm, you know, farm markers. What is it? What is that, farmers market? Whatever. Do you get what I mean? So this gay man is so privileged, but he's also so capsuled that actually in all his successes, if you look closer and you talk to him closer, he's still a 12-year-old on a playground. You know? That, and he's just created this bubble of privilege, and for him, he'll have the notion that, oh, it's getting better for LGBTI people, when we know the reality is like bullshit. It's not getting better, it's getting harder, especially on trans issues. So I suppose what I'm saying is, like the straight man in the room, man, and it pisses me off that, you know what, yes, we don't get to choose our feelings, we also don't get to choose who do we have crushes on, and
Hey, that is also my problem.
And whether, you know, I think when we discover that we're gay, that we discover that when we've got feelings for boys, we somehow become very vulnerable to being so into hypermasculinity, you know, anything that's closest to hypermasculinity, because that reminds you of your erection, you know, or whatever, things like that. I know I'm becoming very sloppy here, but
no. This is a good case.
Yeah. So, but as gay men, I remember like my actually, I would call it an infatuation with cisgendered straight men. It did to I can't even understand today. You know what I mean? And thank God I shifted from it and actually just, for lack of a better term, now I just fetishize them.
Wow, that's a big downgrade.
Exactly. So I've done the so much. I'm not gonna get in trouble for this, but you know what? Fuck it. So I've sort of like they're now a fetish, you know. And I suppose that's because now I know where I stand with them squarely, where I not take them seriously, where I can diffuse their entitlement on you to do like a lot of work. But it's interesting. I mean, the young queers now, I mean, they're like fucking so incredibly liberated. They're creating their own new problems, you know, that we know shit about. So they're not intimidated by like fucking cisgendered straight men. They're like, whatever, step aside, you know? It's interesting times.
But
yeah.
I jokingly said to you, ba ho na be nombana ba thuo malapa street aba emeli ile hore ke tla o share le nna mamang because rena ne re dumela ola a jolele ngwanyana ola rena re emetse go khone bale. These young kids don't take that kind of nonsense.
Remember that? I remember there was a time where I remember as a gay black man in the township, there was a time where if you were a side gay, it was such an honor to be a side gay to a straight man who's still wanted by so many girls and by so many girls, but to be their side gay, my God, you've arrived.
No, I know.
Imagine.
No, I know. You know, but I think the last time I feel like
judging us.
But I think now the day I was done with straight people was in 2008, and this was my friend's, a very close friend of mine, wedding, and I've never told this story publicly. And kind of the wedding, because obviously he had other friends who are straight like him, and I think at the end of almost at the end of the program, he asked all his friends, and he didn't say excluding Matuba, but the way it was said, it was excluding me. He said, can I have my friends who are all married or who are about to get married or so it was clearly not me, because he was talking about his straight friends with their girlfriends and their fiancés and batlako staging, inspiring into, you know, I remember I stood up.
Oh my God.
At that moment, I stood up and I left. And I think I left for quite a while. And
you left the wedding?
I left the friendship too, I think, at some point, because we sort of lost contact and I used other excuses because I wasn't brave enough to confront him, because I think it's unconscious bias. It wasn't homophobia or anything like that, you know? So but I knew that I can't do straight people in their circles. I'll have to dilute them and I'll have to choose them very carefully and make them aware of who I am and what I won't tolerate from them, you know? And I've got beautiful people who are heterosexual and they have children and their kids, you can see how they're not like us, or like, you know, they just know it's Uncle Matuba, and you know what they affirm you just by talking to you. They don't say we know you, but there's something that they say. Motlatsi, you have been quiet, man.
No, because, you know, I'm thinking quite a lot, and I think there's a line to be drawn between what Jay said earlier and what we're talking about now. You know, when we spoke about the HIV and how LGBTQ people, trans men and trans women, gay men in particular, have been at the forefront of many, many movements that ultimately end up benefiting larger society. And if you think about HIV, like if you think HIV is like one of those, but if you think like today, if you think of Black Lives Matter, for instance, in the US, it's a movement started by queer women, and then that grew, and then it benefits, by and large, it benefits Black straight men, actually. It draws attention to the violence, you know, visited upon Black cisgender heterosexual men, you know, by the police and systems in that country. And if you think about South Africa, you think about Fees Must Fall. Fees Must Fall was a movement, again, led by queer women, trans women as well, who came together and formed partnerships with straight women, cisgender straight women, and then led this movement that then grew quite wide into various campuses and ultimately benefits the majority of society. But then it's very weird that even as we kind of, I think we bring ourselves into those spaces as a way of negotiating a sense of togetherness with the mainstream. So we say, and I'll make an example, of, for instance, various platforms. So we create pride events so as to not necessarily create a closed off community just for us, but we say, come into our space as non-LGBTQ people and let's form oneness as community and grow this community outside of the space. And that's why there's a willingness to let cisgender straight people come into pride events, for instance. And I think in the same manner, when you think of Black Lives Matter, total shutdown, fees must fall, the same thing is happening. But then ultimately the favor is never ever returned. And that's why even in those spaces, when it comes to it, if people are forced to draw a line, the line is always drawn at we're not going to let queer issues take the forefront, or we're not going to let the queers overshadow the movement. If queer people start complaining and saying we're having a sense of we've been at the forefront of this movement, but we're feeling like we're not being respected as a straight man, suddenly it's like, but why must you guys make everything about your sexual orientation? Why must you guys make everything about who you're sleeping with? It's like, but we're not thinking about who we sleep with. We're just saying, remember that we actually started this movement. We know more about it than you do. And we also know that despite what we know and contribute, we also know that you guys tend to be the biggest benefactors of it. And we don't mind that being the case, but we just want enough respect. And the movement for queer rights has been like that throughout history. You say we want to get married, we want to have our marriages recognized by the law, and then the question is, but why do you guys want everything that straight people have? Why do you guys want special rights? Why do you guys want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? And ultimately, if you to have a very cogent conversation, it's you don't want anything specific, anything special out of what is already there. You're just saying what's already there doesn't cater for me. Can I also be considered? In fact, can I be included in what's already there, especially if we're living in democratic societies? And when I think about friendships just as well, I think the same applies, because even in friendships, you always have to kind of take what is given. Yeah. If you are not called to, the front with your partner, you must accept that it was not meant to offend you or anything like that. But then you can tell that, how could you say, can I have all my friends? But then there's that tone. I can tell that there's a tone that says, I must not be part of this. I'm not meant to be part of this. But then even if you raised it right after the event, you'd be told that, no, you're drawing attention to something that's not there. You're being overly dramatic, or, you're creating drama where there's none. But the truth of it is, at all times, we always have to kind of negotiate and take things at piecemeal, because somehow, we always have to just be grateful that the majority sees us, or the majority recognizes us, or the majority is allowed to their spaces, so-called as they may be.
That's incredible. That's incredible, because it boils down to we always take them with us. They never take us with.
Yes.
Oh yes, Amanda to that. I'll even put that applause thingy when I edit this one. But yeah, Motlatsi, you put it so wow. But I hate the thing you talked about us being accused of wanting to be in, or being afforded the same rights as straight people and so forth. I don't even know why it's that it's a discussion. But also, I got boredly the whole thing of getting married, because when you get married as in a same-sex couple, you get a civil union. And now I learned, unfortunately, after Leslie's death, or when the death certificate actually comes, it says never married. Because why? Because it's not really a marriage, is it? I was so happy.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
So what does it say?
So it just says never married. You died never. You didn't get married. That's what the death certificate says. Even though you have a civil union certificate.
Wow.
So it just changed my mind about. I thought I really need to carve my path out of this world and just do my thing the way I want. And this whole getting married thing for me, and people think it's because I've done it before, but I thought, no, I'm not getting the government involved anymore in my issues.
That's incredible.
I wasn't aware of that.
I wasn't aware of that too.
Well, get married and then have a partner that dies, because if you die, you won't know. That's a terrible That's a terrible joke. But yeah, it just turned me off completely from this world that how we've been socialized, and accept, and I know Fudge, like saying, or straight people are so entitled to our lives. They'll come and ask you questions like, who's the man, who's the woman? But if they want to find out a FIFA score, they'll just go to Google and find out who won. But why don't they Google this shit for themselves and find out how we live, so that they come who are actually willing to learn something and want to build a society that's actually inclusive? But they don't care about that. They don't care about that. And I struggled convincing one of the establishments here in Soshanguve. We like going to hang out there and to say, putting a placard in the bathroom to say we don't tolerate homophobia or any kind of, because there was an incident where gay people were actually attacked because they were gay and they were an easy target, and it's a place full of straight people. And the person the owner didn't want to take responsibility. I'm like, well, maybe it's none of your business, but it's your establishment. So you will have a right to kick those guys out because you already put a placard to say, I tolerate no homophobia or racism or prejudice of any kind. And eventually it was a small victory, but it was done. And people actually, when you go, people treat you with respect. And sometimes it's just over rehearsed, and you can see what the boss told them, or when that one comes.
Yeah.
It's those small
things. That's exactly what we need. Yes, those are exactly what we need. And I think sometimes we even so hard on ourselves with thinking, oh my God, because even on projections on ourselves, we feel like, we need such a nice victory. When you've done that, you will also, unfortunately, also get a backlash from the same people you're trying to protect. You know what I mean? And you have to keep at it and not let it get to you. But I know it's difficult. The work that I do on a personal and even on a professional wise, I promise you, more than there is a portion of people, there's very same people I'm doing things for the greater good, are the very same people who will attack it because of their own internalized homophobia and internalized bullshit. And I used to sympathize with that, but I'm over that now. I'm like, fuck you, get out of my way. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
But I do it with love. And I think we need to start pushing on that, because if you listen to those voices, then we become apologetic. So sometimes we need to get to a point where they can over dramatize themselves in an apology manner. We'll take it.
Yeah.
As long as if it displays and it shows that that's how progression happens. 20 years from now, it wouldn't be an issue, but it started somewhere. True. So that is an incredible thing. Just a small thing that just says everybody here is welcome, with the little subtle things, they go a long way.
To make somebody feel like they actually belong. Because that's a huge thing. That's a because people run away from stuff somewhere else.
It says I see you. But also you're making me think about something. How do we also, especially in social spaces, I'm not talking about programs, those, I'm not talking about corporate, I'm not talking about those things, but how do we take social spaces where people go and chill and relax and really become themselves? How do we take social spaces and the owners of social spaces to take responsibility? How do we get them to see that it's not actually a lot of work? It's just about your patrons knowing how to treat everybody equal. It's just about your staff members knowing that, being aware that certain types of people could become vulnerable, and how do we protect them? Do you know what I mean? Little things like that.
One of the things that I think about is there's a certain level of being apologetic from us around occupying spaces. And I think about the difference between how we approach occupying spaces as gay men versus lesbian women. So, and I think this is a conversation that's always going on. Lesbian women often, and maybe it's because they are women, particularly, so there's always just issues around women being in space and wanting to feel safe. So what lesbian women tend to do, and they continue to do, is creating spaces for themselves. Whereas now we want to, or more and more gay men just want to find spaces that are established, and we kind of occupy already existing establishments. So, you'll if you're in Tembisa, you go to Busy Corner, and Busy Corner has now become quite an acceptable space for a lot of gay men to go to and chill. And then, and I would think almost every other township has kind of like that space. Huh?
No, I wanted to say, and plus, remember, as gay men, remember our fetishization. That fetish at a corner.
Yes.
We don't get it in our own spaces. So we get it away. We have to go. Yes, but anyway, continue. Yeah.
I think, you know what, that fetish.
And I suppose maybe that's also part of the motivation around why we then popularize certain spaces and then take ownership of them. You know, you even think, even in the bigger, metropolitan or suburban areas, more Great Dane have now become acceptable as spaces where gay men convene, but they're not necessarily, gay targeting or gay owned spaces. But then in those very same spaces, you then find that every now and then there's an incident where a gay guy was, got into a fight with either a bartender or a waiter or the bouncer or whatever. And then there's an issue with how the establishment itself responds to that, which then brings up the issue of, do we then cancel the entire place and say, and call for all LGBT people to not go there, and we know that's actually not going to happen? Or do we then say, let's call them to account and call for an education or a change in how, in the same way that Matuba said they did with a particular place, Shanguve, where you then speak to the owner and say, yeah, you might not think this is a big thing for you, but imagine what this communicates to a certain number of people who constantly visit your establishment. But I think we are often afraid to take that step because, again, we always feel like we are somewhat trespassing when we occupy spaces. Like, don't do too much. Don't be too gay also, Don't forget that this is not your space. So don't be overly dramatic. Don't go there and, So there's always a certain level of wanting to limit ourselves. So even when something wrong happens, you kind of become a bit afraid of wanting to call it out and have it accounted for and calling for a remedy to that situation.
And I agree with you completely, Motlatsi, because I'm not in denial about the social status I have in my community. And instead of using it to demean other people, I'll rather make the people that are coming after me comfortable. So if you make it part of tradition to have gay people at a certain time at a place that is previously occupied by straight people, if you know what I mean. But I think, Rona Jay, we have that privilege because of the social status we have, and we are middle class, and we just command so much respect based on how we look and what we say and what the kind of cars we drive or what we are wearing. We command respect from people. So it's just like any other thing. Even Lihule Sangoma, just like me, what's not going to do means either you're gonna mix poison to kill somebody, or you're gonna mix a cure to help people. So for now, I think it's the social status that we have, and it depends what you do with it. And I see a lot of people just want celebrity status, and that is why a lot of my ideas that I have, I don't take them mainstream because it serves a lot of straight people who it will just fly over their head. So you just start small like this and have a discussion among Black gay men, and we probably won't even touch on half of the issues that affect a lot of gay Black men. But at least we've shown somebody out there who actually you can create your own space and do do little things in a great way. Because that is my mission now. I'm just so done with mainstream and giving my talents to people who want to use this to develop our community.
And you know what I also just realized now with this conversation? I realized that a lot of times I turn down invitations to go into spaces. It's actually because I'm exhausted of heteronormativity. I'm exhausted of it. So I find myself being intensely drawn to sit-ins or spaces where I wouldn't have to do a bit of education around what I am and whatever thing. And don't get me wrong, I agree that I have to carry that somewhere in terms of enlightening people. But I'd also like to sometimes not to be reminded of who I am.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Can I not be reminded of who I am or who I represent. And that sounds very careless to say, but it's a deep feeling. And I think it's valid, you know? So I'm liking the idea that, you know what, as much as let's create our spaces, and as much as Black gay men, we have this supposed innate thing to be integrated into those spaces that cater for our fetishes or our love interest or our whatevers. Then let's do both. You know what I mean? Then let's do both. But that gay man was extremely uncomfortable in spaces of integration in that space and being apologetic. They need to be conscious and take responsibility that, am I building here or am I distracting?
Yeah.
Am I adding or am I subtracting for my people, whether I like it or not? You know what I mean? It's like that. It's like that old saying that says, "Be careful of Black people who want to be the only Black person in the room." So, if you are the Black person in the room, yes, it's okay to be, but then are you shaming other Black people? Are you speaking less of other Black people? Are you in that space, you know, interrogating that other white people in that room to say, hey, we are diverse. Hey, we are not the same. Hey, we don't all look alike. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Are you challenging them also outside? Or are you only taking a minimal position in that boardroom and you nod and be apologetic? Do you get what I mean? So
we've got about 5 minutes left, and I wanted us to touch on the fetish issue. And I want to say that I'm actually cured because I'm from the gay brigade that grew up liking to be with somebody who looks and sounds straight. You know, but I gradually grew out of it. Even when I was married, and I questioned a lot of things that, you know what, the things I told you about me are not that. I'm not bottom, I'm not top only. I'm everything that I want to be. You know, that and I sort of changed in my late 20s about my view because I was reading a bit more also, which helped me. But I don't know, there is still that thing, Jay. Is it just us, or is everybody just? Am I living in my own world?
Good.
Are we the kind of people that we love people who look mainstream, and we wouldn't necessarily date an effeminate top?
I think you know what, I think the narrative is changing, né? And I think we also need to let ourselves off the hook a bit, in a sense that I remember like one of my most winning moments was the gay people that I fell onto their hands, you know, those gay people.
Yeah.
About 10 years ago, two of them turned to me and said, like, you know what, I thought I never saw myself dating another gay person until you came into my life. Do you get what I mean? So that gay person who was always saying, I'm only dating straight men. But when they got exposed to my way of being as a gay man and being in that space, and me realizing that, yeah, you know what, yes, I like straight men, but I also want to try with gay people. And me, I sort of like role modeled that to them. So now this is where the young educates the old, even though the old has been shielding the young. Do you get what I mean? And that also made them evolve. Right now to today, those two people who are still in my life, two of them, they cannot date straight men. They're on some like, I'm only doing gay people, you know? But, you know, from time to time, we still like to lick them. You know what I mean? But I like where you are. You are so over them completely.
I am so, like, I can't even see, like, there was a day, and I think we're coming to you, to Mamelodi. I say to my boyfriend, look at that guy. You can tell he's straight from the way he's walking. Like, yeah. And he saw it, but he says to me, you know, but this is like racism. You know, when you feel like somebody was racist to you, but only you felt it. And you can't tell people because nobody else will understand because it happened to you. I think that's how I feel about a lot of heterosexuals. When I see them, like, oh my God. Yeah. But when I was like, you're pretty younger than us. You probably have had threesome with trans people and done some wonderful, crazy things in bed. I don't want you to share those, but I'm sure you are much more open.
I'm not that young.
Oh, no, but you are younger than me.
I am not that young.
He is younger.
I'm younger than you, but I'm not that young.
Make me a
But,
dinosaur.
I think if you bump into a group of 20 to 24-year-olds, they are differently oriented in their views around sex and sexuality, which I appreciate. I'm glad that's where they are because, they are living a bit more freer with a bit more liberation than we did. And I think that's good for them, for their mental and their physical and sexual health. I think that's a great thing. If there's anyone to claim that as a victory for the next generation, that should be it. Like the current generation has a bit more of a liberated mind at that age.
Yeah, I think let's leave it there, guys. Well, there's so much to talk about. I don't know. We'll talk on WhatsApp whether we should do this a weekly thing or what.
You know what I love about this? I love that we talked about everything and nothing. We opened like a whole lot of can of worms. So it's up to you, Matuba, to go sit down with this and now, I don't know, title it, and then you've got a map now. You've got a mind map.
I do.
There's a lot.
And then come back to us. I would absolutely enjoy this. I wouldn't mind doing this once a week or even twice if it's possible. But maybe once a week, this will be awesome. I love it.
Thank you so much. I love you both so much. We'll speak soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Love you. Bye.